Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lilbumblebear's Let's Play. I'm Kristen, and I am here with an author I absolutely adored as a child. Have you ever heard of Beatrix Potter? She made the sweetest little stories. Well, I hope you guys will enjoy the magical world of Beatrix Potter. Please give the video a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Did you grow up with Beatrix Potter? You know, when I was a kid, I had cassette tapes that were read-alongs with books. So you would put the tape in and it would be a little audio reading of the books, all, you know, like a little theater production with different character voices, and you could read along. So yeah, let me know if you grew up with any of the books or maybe you had cassette tapes to read along with. And of course, subscribe for more nostalgic gaming. I have a Twitter and Instagram you can follow, and I have a Discord server open to everyone. So feel free to join, invite links in the description box. Let's enjoy the beautiful, charming world of Beatrix Potter. Please enjoy.
This is William Heelis, Beatrix's husband. He was a solicitor in the town of Hawkshead in the Lake District and acted for Beatrix when she started to buy farmland in that area. They married in 1913 when Beatrix was 47. Willie was a keen sportsman, enjoying golf, bowls, fishing and shooting, and was an enthusiastic member of the local group of country dancers. Beatrix and her mother in front of Castle Cottage. Beatrix and Willie on their wedding day. Beatrix at the Eskdale Agricultural Show. William Heelis. Beatrix at the Eskdale. Beatrix is designed for a Peter Rabbit doll. At the time of the First World War, in 1914, Beatrix had almost stopped producing books, but her reputation as a writer and illustrator was as strong as ever. She herself had made the first Peter Rabbit doll in 1903, and now many products associated with her books were on sale. These sideshows, as she called them, did increasingly well and included toys, figurines, tea sets, a board game, slippers, and calendars. French editions of the Peter Rabbit books. In 1921, the Tale of Peter Rabbit and the Tale of Benjamin Bunny were published in French for the first time. In the years to come, her books would eventually be translated into over 30 different languages. Henry P. Coolidge. The Peter Rabbit books quickly became equally popular in America, and Beatrix received many visits from Americans. She liked the American approach to her work and wrote a longer story called The Fairy Caravan, set in the Lake District, which by her own wish was only published in America after her death. She dedicated it to the American boy Henry P. Coolidge, who had encouraged her to write it. Troutbeck Park Farm. Beatrix's real interest in later life was farming and the conservation of land. In 1924, she bought one of the most beautiful hill farms in the Lake District, Troutbeck Park Farm. Shepherd Tom Story. Troutbeck Park Farm was over 2,000 acres in size and could support many hundreds of sheep. Beatrix was determined to find one of the best shepherds in the district to look after it, and she employed Tom Story, who continued to work for Beatrix for the rest of her life. Beatrix judging Herdwick sheep in 1943. Beatrix's reputation as a farmer and sheep breeder was considerable. She was a respected judge at local shows, and was even elected the first woman president of the Herdwick Sheep Breeders Association, although she died before she could take office. Yew Tree Farm, part of the Monk Coniston estate. Beatrix worked closely with the National Trust, the organisation dedicated to the preservation of areas of natural beauty. In 1930, she bought the 4,000-acre Monk Coniston estate in conjunction with the National Trust, and agreed that she would eventually donate her share of the land to them so that the estate would not have to be split up. Beatrix in 1943 with her Pekingese dogs Tsuzi and Chulei. Beatrix's busy life continued until the autumn of 1943, when, now aged 77, she was confined indoors with bronchitis. But she still took a keen interest in her farm and enjoyed the company of Willie and her 2 pet Pekingese dogs. She died 3 days before Christmas. Her shepherd, Tom Story, scattered her ashes in a secret place on the Lakeland Fells and, faithful to her instructions, never revealed to anyone where that place was. Beatrix aged 5. Beatrix Potter was born on the 28th of July, 1866, the eldest child of a wealthy lawyer, Rupert Potter, and his wife, Helen. Beatrix and her mother, Helen Potter. Like many young children at that time, Beatrix did not see a great deal of her mother, who was busy running the household, paying visits and entertaining guests. Beatrix was brought up by a nurse. Bolton Gardens. The Potters' home at number 2 Bolton Gardens in Kensington, London, was an elegant 4-storey building. It had stables, a coach house, and a large garden. There were servants to look after it, including a cook, a housekeeper, a butler, a coachman, and a groom, as well as a nurse for Beatrix. Beatrix and her father, Rupert Potter. As Beatrix grew older, she spent more time with her father. He was a very enthusiastic photographer and often used her as his model. He also encouraged her interest in painting and drawing. Beatrix and Bertram. When Beatrix was 6, her brother Bertram was born. Brother and sister became very good friends, in spite of the difference in their ages. Beatrix's grandfather, Edmund Potter, with Rupert, at Camfield Place. Beatrix's grandparents, Edmund and Jessie Potter, lived in a large country house called Camfield Place in Hertfordshire, within easy reach of London. Beatrix was very fond of her grandparents. A bedroom at Camfield Place. The Potter family frequently visited Beatrix's grandparents at Camfield Place. When she was grown up, Beatrix drew this picture of the bedroom she had always stayed in as a child. A family party at Dalguy's house in Scotland. Mr. and Mrs. Potter liked to have long summer holidays in the country. Almost every year, while the children were growing up, the family spent about 3 months in a rented house in Scotland, near the River Tay, where Rupert Potter could arrange fishing expeditions. The whole household, including servants and pets, travelled north by train. A family party at Dalguy's house in Scotland. Mr. and Mrs. Potter liked to have long summer holidays in the country. Almost every year, while the children were growing up, the family spent about 3 months in a rented house in Scotland, near the River Tay, where Beatrix and Bertram at Dalguy's house. On holiday in Scotland, Beatrix and Bertram were allowed to explore the riverbanks and the woods. They tracked wild deer, caught rabbits and tamed them, and learnt to identify plants and birds. The schoolroom at Bolton Gardens. It was difficult for the children to settle down in London after the freedom of the country, but they had their own schoolroom on the 3rd floor of the house where they did their lessons. They also kept numerous pets there, including a frog, lizards, newts, a ring snake, a bat, a dormouse, and a tortoise. This is a drawing Beatrix made of the schoolroom. Beatrix aged 15 with her dog Spot. Beatrix loved animals of all kinds. She liked to observe their behaviour and to draw and paint them as accurately as she could. Although her life in London was rather lonely, she was always occupied. She kept a secret diary written in code in which she recorded the events of her daily life. John Millais in his studio. Beatrix's parents recognised her talent as an artist and arranged for her to have special teachers. Her father took her to visit art galleries and museums and introduced her to his friend, the artist John Millais. Ray Castle, near Windermere in the Lake District. In the summer of 1882, when Beatrix was 16, the Potters' usual holiday home, Dalguy's house in Scotland, was, to their dismay, no longer available. So instead, Rupert Potter rented a very imposing building called Ray Castle, near Windermere in the English Lake District. It was Beatrix's first introduction to a part of the country that she would love for the rest of her life. Beatrix and Bertram with their father in 1883. In 1883, Bertram, who was 11, was sent away to boarding school. Beatrix, now 17, had hoped her own lessons would finish, but her parents employed a new governess for her, Annie Carter. Beatrix and Bertram with Annie Carter. Annie Carter, Beatrix's last governess, was only 3 years older than she was. Although to begin with Beatrix had been opposed to the idea of her coming, thinking that at 17 she was old enough to study alone, she and Annie became very good friends, and Beatrix found it pleasant to have a companion of almost her own age. Beatrix, Rupert and Bertram in 1886. Annie Carter, Beatrix's governess, left Bolton Gardens in 1885 to get married. Beatrix, as a well-to-do Victorian young lady, was not expected to go out to work, and she lived at home with her parents. In addition, her health was poor, and she suffered several bad bouts of illness at this time. This photograph of her with her father and brother at Camfield Place shows her hair cut short as a result of an attack of rheumatic fever. Beatrix with Benjamin on a lead. Beatrix continued to keep pet animals. A great favourite was a rabbit called Benjamin Bouncer, whom Beatrix had brought from a London bird shop and carried home in a paper bag. He went everywhere with her, and she made numerous sketches of him. Beatrix's illustration for F.E. Weatherly's A Happy Pair. In 1890, Beatrix sold some of her work for the first time. The firm of Hildesheimer and Faulkner took her drawings as greetings cards and illustrations. Her rabbit Benjamin was the model for these pictures. A portrait photograph of Beatrix taken in Scotland in 1892. Beatrix had always been interested in natural history, and in her early 20s she began to make a serious study of fungi. In 1892, the Potter family spent the summer at Burnham in Perthshire, Scotland, which was an excellent place for finding unusual specimens. Charlie Mackintosh, the Perthshire naturalist. On holiday in Burnham, Scotland, in 1892, Beatrix contacted the local postman there, Charlie Mackintosh, who was famous as an expert on mosses and fungi. He admired her fungus paintings and gave her advice and help. Later, when she was back in London, he sent examples of rare fungi by post for her to draw. Noel Moore. Beatrix often wrote illustrated letters to the Moore children. When the oldest boy, Noel, was 5, she wrote him a letter all about the imaginary adventures of one of her pet rabbits, Peter. My dear Noel, I don't know what to write to you, so I shall tell you a story about 4 little rabbits, whose names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. The Moore family. Beatrix remained friends with her last governess, Annie, who had left the Potter household to marry Edwin Moore. Annie and Edwin had 8 children in all, and when Beatrix was in London, she liked to visit the lively Moore household. Publisher Frederick Warne, with his wife and 2 of his children. After some difficulty, Beatrix found a publisher for her Peter Rabbit story, the London firm of Frederick Warne. This was a family business run at this time by the 3 sons of the founder. Beatrix with Canon Hardwicke Rawnsley and his son. Some time after she had written the Peter Rabbit letter to Noel Moore, Beatrix decided she would like to turn the story into a book. She was encouraged by a friend, Canon Rawnsley, who was a clergyman in the Lake District. He was also an author himself, and he offered to help her look for a publisher for her little book. The Warne first edition of The Tale of Peter Rabbit. The Tale of Peter Rabbit was published by Warne in 1902. The first edition sold out immediately. The library of the Warnes' house in Bedford Square. Beatrix was often invited to the Warne family house, where she was made to feel very welcome. She got on well with Norman's sister Milly, and enjoyed being part of a large family. This picture of the library in the Warnes' house shows Beatrix's little books lying on the table. Norman Warne. After the success of the Tale of Peter Rabbit, Beatrix went on to write other books. Norman Warne, the youngest of the Warne brothers who ran the publishing company, acted as her editor, and they worked together closely and became great friends. Winifred Warne with her doll's house. When Beatrix decided to write The Tale of Two Bad Mice in 1904, she used a real doll's house that Norman Warne had made for his niece Winifred as her model for the one in the story. Norman also built a glass-sided cage for Beatrix's pet mice, Tom Thumb and Hunca Munca, so that she could watch and draw them more easily. Beatrix's sketch of her farm, Hilltop. After her fiancé's death, Beatrix no longer wanted to be in London. The money she had earned from her books had enabled her to buy a small farm in the Lake District, and she now spent as much time there as she could. Norman Warne with his young nephew. In 1905, Norman Warne asked Beatrix to marry him. Beatrix was delighted to accept, even though her parents disapproved of her marrying a man in trade. However, tragically, Norman died only a month later from a form of leukemia. Beatrix in the porch at Hilltop. This is Beatrix at Hilltop Farm in the village of Sawrey, which she bought in 1905. By the time this picture was taken in 1913, Beatrix had become so successful as a writer that she was no longer financially dependent on her parents. Beatrix with some ducklings on her farmland. Beatrix used the money from her books to expand her farm, Hilltop. Although she had a manager to look after the day-to-day running of the farm, she became involved in all aspects of the work and found it thoroughly enjoyable. Beatrix and Willie on their wedding day. William Heelis. To help her in her property dealing, Beatrix employed a local solicitor, William Heelis. He shared Beatrix's love of the Lake District countryside and her desire to preserve its beauty. Beatrix at the Eskdale Agriculture. Beatrix's French edition. Troutbeck Park Farm. Beatrix Judge. Beatrix in 19. Beatrix and her mother. This is Beatrix's mother, Helen Leach. She came from a family of wealthy Manchester shipbuilders and cotton exporters, and was married to Rupert Potter in 1863. They lived in an elegant house in Bolton Gardens, in London. Like most well-to-do ladies of her time, Helen spent her days running the household and managing the servants, paying social calls in her horse-drawn carriage and entertaining friends at home. She was a talented artist and encouraged her children to draw and paint. Bolton Gardens. Bolton Gardens in London at dusk, as seen from Beatrix's family home. The painting is inscribed, "A November Day." Beatrix Potter's farm, Hilltop, on a snowy night. Sidmouth Beach in southwest England, with figures on the sand in the foreground and the cliffs receding into the distance behind them. The Newlands Valley, from Beatrix's sketchbook of the Derwentwater area in the Lake District. This image appears as a background to a picture in the Tale of Mrs Tiggy-Winkle. The crossroads on the way from Hilltop Farm to Hawkshead. Beatrix used this scene in the Tale of Pigling Bland, showing the two pigs walking down this road. A view over a garden from a high wall with a background of Lakeland Fells. This might be a background picture for the view of the garden in The Tale of Benjamin Bunny. Derwent Bay, from a sketchbook dating 1901. The picture was reworked for The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin. Bolton Gardens in London at dusk. Beatrix and her father, Rupert. This is Rupert Potter, Beatrix's father. Rather than enter the family textile business, Rupert chose instead to become a lawyer. He studied law in London, was called to the bar at the age of 25, and married Helen Leach in 1863, when he was 31. One of his chief interests was the then fairly new art of photography. He took this photograph of himself and Beatrix using a delayed action camera. Beatrix and Bertram. This is a picture of Beatrix's brother, Bertram, who was born in 1872, when Beatrix was 6. In spite of the difference in their ages, the two children were close companions, until Bertram was sent away to school at the age of 11. He shared his sister's interests in nature and in painting, and helped her look after the animals they kept in their schoolroom. When Bertram grew up, he became a landscape artist. Beatrix's grandfather. This is Edmund Potter, Beatrix's grandfather. He ran a cotton printing firm near Manchester, which specialised in designs on calico. Edmund was also interested in politics and art, and became president of the Manchester School of Art, and in 1861 Liberal MP for Carlisle. He married Jessie Crompton in 1829, and they had 7 children. Beatrix's grandfather. This is a portrait of Jessie Crompton, who was Beatrix's grandmother and her favourite grandparent. After Jessie's husband, Edmund Potter, retired from his work, they moved into a large house in the country in Hertfordshire called Camfield Place. Beatrix and her brother Bertram loved visiting their grandmother's house, where they could have fresh milk and new-laid eggs straight from the farm. A bedroom at Camfield Place. In the drawing entitled The Rabbit's Dream, Peter Rabbit is asleep in the bedroom at Camfield Place. Greedy Guinea Pigs, a Christmas card design produced for the publishers Hildesheimer and Faulkner. An illustration for the nursery rhyme Three Little Mice Sat Down to Spin. The interior of the potting shed with watering can and garden tools at Bedwell Lodge in Hertfordshire. A fantasy picture of rabbits in the potting shed at Bedwell Lodge in Hertfordshire. This shed was probably the inspiration for Mr. McGregor's tool shed in The Tale of Peter Rabbit. The Little Lizard, Bill, an illustration for a scene in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. In the drawing entitled The Rabbit's Dream, Peter Rabbit is asleep in the bedroom at Camfield Place. Greedy Guinea Pigs, a Christmas card design produced for the publishers Hildesheimer and Faulkner. An illustration for the nursery rhyme Three Little Mice Sat Down to Spin. The Tailor of Gloucester. One bitter... This is a photograph of Caroline Hutton, who was Beatrix's distant cousin, but also a great friend. When Beatrix was a young woman, she used to enjoy staying with Caroline at the Hutton family home, Harescombe Grange in Gloucestershire. On one of these visits, she heard a local legend about a tailor who claimed to have had magic help in making a suit of clothes, and she later developed this story into her own book, The Tailor of Gloucester. Beatrix and Caroline both became interested in farming after their marriages and remained friends all their lives. One bitter cold day, an illustration. A family party at Dalguy's house in Scotland. Beatrix and Bert, the school. Beatrix aged 15 with her dogs, John Millay in his studio. After Jessie's husband. This is William Heelis. This is a... Walter, known as Jim, and Marjorie, known as Molly, were the children of Beatrix's cousin, Edith Gaddam. The Gaddams lived in Manchester, but like Beatrix they spent many holidays in the Lake District, and later moved to live there permanently. Beatrix wrote many letters to the Gaddam children, one of which contains an early version of the Tale of Mr Jeremy Fisher. She also made them several beautiful toy pictures with moving parts. Click on the picture. Click on the picture. This is Sir Henry Roscoe, who was Beatrix Potter's uncle. He was an eminent scientist in the field of chemistry and was Vice-Chancellor of the University of London. He was very fond of Beatrix and a great admirer of her artistic talent. He encouraged her in her first commercial work, the sale of drawings for greetings cards. And when she became interested in painting and studying fungi, he was able to introduce her to important natural history experts. This is Beatrix's mother, Helen Lee. This is a Studies of bats and bat skeletons. 6 studies of the real Benjamin Bunny's head. A study of a small orange fish, with a drawing of a sea anemone beneath, done when Beatrix was on holiday in Weymouth, in southwest England. A painting of the real Peter Rabbit on his rug in front of the fire. A baby hedgehog, drawn on the palm of a hand to show its size. Studies of a dead thrush from various angles. The drawing is inscribed, "Woodcut, 1902, picked up dead in the snow." Studies of bats and bat skeletons. 6 studies of the real Benjamin Bunny. A painting of a rabbit done in 1880 when Beatrix was 14. A study of 12 different caterpillars drawn when Beatrix was 9 years old. Harebells and marguerites with a sketch of purple heather below, dated July the 5th, 1880. 2 pages from the drawing book Beatrix kept in 1876 when she was 10. The left-hand page shows Aberfeldy Bridge and a lighthouse, boats and the coast. The drawing on the right-hand page is of rabbits skating and rabbits walking in a high wind. The library at Ray Castle in the Lake District, where Beatrix and her family stayed on holiday in 1882, when Beatrix was 16. A corner of the 3rd floor schoolroom at No. 2 Bolton Gardens, drawn by Beatrix in 1885, when she was 19. A painting of a rabbit done in 1880. In the drawing entitled The Rabbit's Dream, Peter Rabbit is asleep in the bedroom at Camfield Place. Greedy Guinea Pigs, a Christmas card design produced for the publishers Hildesheimer and Faulkner. An illustration for the nursery rhyme 3 Little Mice Sat Down to Spin. The interior of the potting shed with watering can and garden tools at Bedwell Lodge in Hertfordshire. A fantasy picture of rabbits in the potting shed at Bedwell Lodge in Hertfordshire. This shed with the little lizard, Bill, in the drawing entitled The Bolton Gardens in London. Beatrix, Sidmouth Beach, the Newlands Valley from the crossroads on the way. Views of a ground beetle, Carabus nemoralis, from above and below. The inscription reads, "Twice life-size." The same species of beetle appears in The Tale of Mrs Tittlemouse. Studies of a painted lady butterfly and a small tortoiseshell butterfly, with paintings of the wing scales magnified under a microscope. Caterpillars of the poplar hawk moth, the puss moth and the privet hawk moth. A lithograph of a sheet web spider, highly magnified. Fly agaric toadstools with ferns, beech leaves, mosses and lichen. Caprinus and deathcap toadstools found and drawn at Lingholm in the Lake District. Sprays of black currants and raspberries. Coloured sketches of foxgloves with a pencil sketch of a bird. Views of a ground beetle, Carabus nemoralis, from above and below. The inscription reads, "Twice life-size." The same species of beetle appears in The Tale of Mrs Tittlemouse. Studies of a painted lady butterfly and a small tortoiseshell butterfly, with paintings of the wing scales magnified under a microscope. Caterpillars of the poplar hawk moth, the puss moth and the privet hawk, a lithograph of a sheep, fly agaric toadstool. The Tale of Peter Rabbit. While their mother is out, Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail gather blackberries down the lane. But naughty Peter Rabbit goes straight to Mr McGregor's garden. He eats lettuces, French beans and radishes, but when he looks for some parsley he bumps into Mr McGregor, who chases him and very nearly catches him. Poor Peter is terribly frightened. He loses his jacket and shoes, but manages to hide from Mr McGregor in a water can half full of water. In the end he escapes from the garden and runs home, where Mrs Rabbit puts him to bed and gives him a dose of chamomile tea. To find out more about this tale, click on the picture. To choose another story, click on Go Back. In 1893, Beatrix Potter wrote a picture letter to Noel Moore, the son of her former governess, about a naughty rabbit called Peter. Her model for Peter was very likely her own pet rabbit, Peter Piper. The Tale of Peter Rabbit was eventually published in 1902, priced at 1 shilling, 5p, and has never been out of print since. The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin. In the autumn, Squirrel Nutkin, his brother Twinkleberry and the other squirrels sail their little rafts to the island in the lake to gather nuts. Old Brown Owl lives on the island, and the squirrels bring him a present every day in return for permission to collect nuts. Nutkin, though, is naughty and cheeky to Old Brown, singing out riddles and playing games while the others work. Eventually Old Brown has had enough of Nutkin's rudeness, and he holds him up by the tail to skin him. But Nutkin pulls so hard that his tail comes off, and he escapes without it. To find out more about this tale, click on the picture. To choose another story, click on Go Back. In 1901, while staying near Derwentwater in the Lake District, Beatrix Potter wrote a letter about squirrels to 8-year-old Nora Moore, daughter of her former governess. The letter was the inspiration for the Tale of Squirrel Nutkin, which was published in 1903 and dedicated to Nora. The Tailor of Gloucester. One bitter cold day before Christmas, a poor old tailor starts to make a fine coat and waistcoat for the Mayor of Gloucester to wear for his wedding on Christmas Day. He cuts out all the cloth to stitch together, and goes home leaving everything ready, except that he still needs one skein of cherry-coloured silk. He asks Simpkin, his cat, to buy the cherry-coloured thread, and because he's starting to feel ill, he sits down to rest in front of the fire. He is surprised to hear a tapping noise coming from the dresser, and under the cups he finds lots of little mice trapped by Simpkin for his supper. The tailor releases them all, but when Simpkin returns, he is furious to find the mice have gone, and in revenge he secretly hides the tailor's thread in a teapot. Then the tailor becomes really ill, and while he lies for 3 days and nights, delirious with fever, the grateful mice stitch the mayor's coat. Simpkin sees them through the shop window, and begins to feel ashamed of his own bad behaviour. The tailor wakes up on Christmas morning, recovered from his fever, and sees that Simpkin has put the thread on his bed. He hurries to his shop, and to his amazement finds the coat and waistcoat finished, all except one buttonhole, with a tiny scrap of paper pinned to it with the words, "No more twist." All the merchants of Gloucester want coats like the mayor's, and the tailor becomes quite rich. To find out more, Beatrix Potter first heard the true story on which the Tailor of Gloucester is based when visiting her cousin Caroline Hutton at Harescombe Grange in Gloucestershire. In reality, the mayor's coat had been finished by his assistants, but in Beatrix's version, the work is done by mice. She sketched background pictures of Gloucester on a hot summer day, but for the story she drew the city covered in snow. The book was published in time for Christmas, 1903. The Tale of Benjamin Bunny. Benjamin and Peter Rabbit go back to Mr. McGregor's garden to get Peter's jacket and shoes, which have been made into a scarecrow. Peter puts them on, and the two of them collect some onions in Peter's big red handkerchief for Mrs. Rabbit. But on the way home, the two little rabbits meet a cat. They hide under a basket, which the cat then sits on, trapping them for hours. Benjamin's father rescues them and takes them home, but not before giving them both a good hiding for their naughtiness. To find out more about this tale, Beatrix Potter probably modelled the character of Benjamin Bunny on her real-life rabbit Benjamin. She sketched background scenes for the tale while on holiday in the Lake District. The book was published in 1904. The Tale of Two Bad Mice. While the dolls are out, Tom Thumb and Hunca Munca explore the beautiful doll's house and are excited to find the table laid for dinner. Their excitement turns to frustration when they find they cannot get the ham and fish off the plates, and the two mice smash all the toy food. They search the rest of the house and take a feather pillow, a chair, a cradle, and some other odds and ends back to their hole. The dolls return to find the damage, and the little girl who owns them decides to get a policeman doll to look after the house. But in the end, the mice find a way to make amends for their bad behaviour. To find out more about this tale, click on the picture. To choose another story, click on Go Back. The doll's house in this book was modelled on one that Beatrix's publisher Norman Warne made for his niece Winifred. The Tale of Two Bad Mice was published in 1904 and dedicated to the little girl who had the doll's house. The Tale of Mrs Tiggy-Winkle. Little Lucy has lost 3 handkerchiefs and a pinafore, and none of the animals she meets in the farmyard knows where they are. She thinks she glimpses them on the hillside, but when she goes to look, she finds clotheslines and clothespins, and a little door going into the hill. Inside, she meets a very stout, short and prickly person who introduces herself as Mrs Tiggy-Winkle, the washerwoman. Lucy watches while Mrs Tiggy-Winkle irons all the animals' clothes, and is delighted to find that her pinny and hankies are in the basket as well. When the ironing is finished, they have tea by the fire, and then walk down the hill to deliver the bundles of clothes. At the stile, Lucy turns to thank the washerwoman, but to her surprise, she sees nothing but a hedgehog running away up the hill. To find Beatrix Potter's pet hedgehog, Mrs Tiggy-Winkle, was the sometimes reluctant model for the drawings in this story. Mrs Tiggy-Winkle's character was inspired by a comical old washerwoman, Kitty MacDonald, whom Beatrix Potter met while on holiday in Scotland. The Tale of Mrs Tiggy-Winkle was published in 1905. The Tale of Mr Jeremy Fisher. Mr Jeremy Fisher takes his lily-leaf boat out to fish for minnows. He sits for an hour in the rain, but catches nothing. After lunching on a butterfly sandwich, he gets a bite almost immediately, but instead of a nice fat minnow, he lands a spiny stickleback, which pricks his fingers before jumping back into the water. Worse is to come, though, when a large trout rises to the surface and swallows Mr Jeremy Fisher whole. Luckily, Mr Jeremy's raincoat tastes so horrible that the trout spits him out, and he hurries home, vowing never to go fishing again. His friends, Sir Isaac Newton and Mr Alderman Ptolemy Tortoise, come for dinner. And instead of minnows, they have roasted grasshopper with ladybird sauce. To find out more about Beatrix Potter drew a simple version of this story in black and white for a children's annual in 1892. The book was published in 1906, but not before Beatrix had taken a frog in a jam jar to the worn offices to show them that she had the colours right. The Tale of Tom Kitten. Mrs. Tabitha Twitchit has friends coming for tea, so she washes and brushes her kittens and dresses them in their best clothes to be ready for the guests. While she prepares the hot buttered toast, she sends the kittens into the garden. Moppet and Mittens very quickly fall and stain their clean white pinafores. They climb up onto the garden wall, with Tom, who has nearly outgrown his little suit, following them and shedding buttons all the while. They see the 3 Puddle-Ducks coming along the road, and Moppet asks Mr. Drake Puddle-Duck to help them put Tom's clothes back on. Instead, the ducks dress up in the kittens' clothes and march off to a pond. Mrs. Tabitha is very upset to find the kittens have lost their clothes, and sends them upstairs, where they disturb their mother's tea party by causing all sorts of extraordinary noises. To find out more about this tale, the Tale of Tom Kitten was published in 1907, by which time Beatrix Potter had owned Hilltop Farm in the Lake District village of Sawrey for nearly 2 years. Both house and garden feature in the story. She borrowed the local stonemason's kitten to use as a model. The Tale of Jemima Puddle-Duck. Jemima Puddle-Duck badly wants to hatch her own eggs and decides to look for a convenient, dry nesting place away from the farm. A charming, sandy-haired gentleman offers to let her use his woodshed, and silly Jemima, not realizing he is a fox, happily accepts. She lays her eggs and agrees to join the sandy-whiskered stranger for dinner before she starts sitting. Kep, the collie dog, finds Jemima collecting herbs for a savoury omelette, but as they are all ingredients used for stuffing a roast duck, his suspicions are aroused. He calls on 2 foxhound puppies for help, and they drive the fox away once and for all. Jemima is very frightened, and to make matters worse, the puppies run into the shed and eat up her eggs. But she returns to the farm with Kep, and soon lays some more eggs, which she is allowed to keep and hatch herself. The setting for the Tale of Jemima Puddle-Duck is Beatrix Potter's Lake District farm, Hilltop, and its surroundings. The farm manager's wife, Mrs. Cannon, and her children appear at the beginning of the story. Kep was Beatrix's favourite sheepdog, and Jemima was a real duck. The book was published in 1908. The Tale of the Flopsy Bunnies. When he grew up, Benjamin Bunny married his cousin Flopsy, and they had a large family. The children were generally known as the Flopsy Bunnies. One day, Benjamin and the children find a feast of overgrown lettuces on Mr. McGregor's rubbish pile and stuff themselves until they fall fast asleep. Benjamin is woken by Thomasina Tittlemouse, and they watch in horror as Mr. McGregor discovers the sleeping bunnies and ties them up in his sack. While Mr. McGregor is putting away his mowing machine, Flopsy arrives, but neither she nor Benjamin can undo the knots. In the end, Mrs. Tittlemouse cleverly nibbles a hole in the corner of the sack, and the Flopsy bunnies are released. Benjamin and Flopsy stuff the empty sack with rotten vegetable marrows, an old brush and decayed turnips, and Mr. McGregor takes it back to his wife, thinking the bunnies are still inside. The Flopsy bunnies watch through the window as Mrs. McGregor discovers the vegetables, but hurry home when one of the rotten marrows comes flying out. To find out more about this tale, by 1909, when the Tale of the Flopsy Bunnies was published, Beatrix Potter's earlier books had become very popular and there was a great demand for further rabbit stories. She modelled the garden in this book on her Uncle Fred Burton's garden at Gwynennog in Wales. The Tale of Mrs Tittlemouse. Mrs Tittlemouse is a little wood mouse who lives in a terribly tidy house in a bank under a hedge. She has lots of unwelcome insect visitors whom she shoos away for fear of dirty footprints. But Babbitty Bumble and her friends, who have made a nest in a storeroom, will not go. Mrs Tittlemouse returns to her parlour only to find she has another uninvited guest, Mr Jackson the toad, leaving wet marks everywhere. Mr Jackson has been tempted in by the smell of honey. He pulls the bee's nest out of the storeroom and drives away Babbitty Bumble and her friends, while Mrs Tittlemouse hides in the nut cellar. When she comes out again, all the visitors have gone, but the house is so untidy it takes her 2 weeks to spring clean everything and make the door smaller so that Mr Jackson can't come back in. To find out more, Beatrix Potter's interest in all kinds of creatures, from spiders to bees, is clearly evident in the Tale of Mrs Tittlemouse. In fact, her publisher thought that some of her creepy-crawly insects were not suitable for a children's book, and so Beatrix included a beautiful picture of a butterfly as well. The book was published in 1910. The Tale of Timmy Tiptoes. The grey squirrels wrongly suspect that fat little Timmy Tiptoes has been digging up their nut stores, and they chase him and push him through a woodpecker's hole in a hollow tree in which Timmy has been storing his nuts. Poor Timmy is stunned and sore, but he is looked after inside the tree by Chippy Hackee, a little striped chipmunk. Timmy and Chippy get on so well and eat so many of Timmy's nuts that Timmy becomes too fat to squeeze out through the woodpecker's hole, even when his wife Goody comes to fetch him. In the end, a big wind blows the top off the hollow tree, and Timmy and Goody go home together. Chippy Hackee, on the other hand, refuses to go home until a week later, when a large bear comes sniffing at the hollow tree. To find out more about this tale, click on the picture. To choose another story, click on Go Back. The Tale of Timmy Tiptoes, featuring American grey squirrels, chipmunks and a bear, was written to appeal to Beatrix Potter's growing American audience. By 1911, when this book was published, she was very occupied with farming and looking after her elderly parents, and Timmy Tiptoes' story was the only book to appear in that year. It was dedicated to many unknown little friends, including Monica. The Tale of Johnny Town Mouse. Timmy Willie is a little country mouse who goes to town by mistake in a hamper of vegetables. In the town house, he meets Johnny Town Mouse and his elegant friends, who do their best to make Timmy Willie welcome. But the rich food does not agree with him. He is alarmed by the cat, and he hates all the town noises that never seem to stop. Johnny Town Mouse is sympathetic, although he finds it hard to understand the appeal of Timmy Willie's garden. He shows Timmy Willie how to get home by hiding in the empty hamper on its return journey. The following spring, Timmy Willie is surprised and delighted to have a visit from Johnny Town Mouse, who is escaping from the spring cleaning in the town house. Johnny does not stay long, though. He finds the country too quiet. To find out more about this tale, click The tale of Johnny Townmouse is set in Lake District surroundings. Johnny lives in the town of Hawkshead, as can be seen from the archway in one of the pictures, while Timmy Willie has his home in a Sorry garden. Johnny Townmouse himself is based on a Dr. Parsons who used to play golf with Beatrix's husband Willie Heelis. The book was published in 1918. The Tale of Mr Todd. One afternoon, old Mr Bouncer is left in charge of Benjamin Bunny and Flopsy's young family. Tommy Brock passes by, and he and Mr Bouncer start chatting. Mr Bouncer invites Tommy Brock into the burrow for cowslip wine and a cabbage leaf cigar, and soon falls asleep. Benjamin and Flopsy return to find him sleeping, and no sign of their babies. Flopsy is distraught. Benjamin sets off to follow Tommy Brock, and with the help of his cousin Peter Rabbit, whom he meets on the way, they track Tommy Brock to one of the houses of Mr Todd the fox. Tommy Brock is asleep, and the table is half laid for dinner. They are relieved to realise the rabbit babies are still alive, shut up in the old oven, but they cannot get into the house to rescue them. Benjamin and Peter decide to tunnel their way in and dig through the night. Morning comes, and with it a very cross Mr Todd. He is enraged to find Tommy Brock asleep in his bed, and while the rabbits hide in their tunnel, Mr Todd sets up an elaborate trap for the badger. Tommy Brock, who has really been awake all the time, avoids the trap and surprises Mr Todd instead. The two have a tremendous fight, in the course of which crockery, furniture, clocks and windows are all broken. The battle continues out of doors, over the bank and down the hill. As soon as the coast is clear, Benjamin and Peter rush into the house, rescue the baby rabbits and hurry home with them to Flopsy's delight and Mr Bouncer's relief. To find out more about this tale, click on the picture. To choose another story, click on Go Back. When writing this book, Beatrix Potter said she was tired of writing goody-goody books about nice people, so for a change she wrote about two disagreeable people, Tommy Brock and Mr Todd. The book was published in 1912. There are not many colour pictures in this book, for Beatrix now had less time for painting, but she included black and white illustrations in the style of woodcuts. The Tale of Pigling Bland. Aunt Pettitoes has 8 hungry and unruly piglets and realises that she can't keep them all. 2 of them, Pigling Bland and Alexander, are dressed in their Sunday best, handed little bundles, pig licenses and some conversation peppermints, and sent off to market to find work. They meet a policeman who asks to see their licenses. Alexander has lost his already, and the policeman escorts him back to the farm. Poor Pigling Bland carries on dejectedly alone, and as night falls, realises that he has lost his way. He takes refuge in a hen house, but Mr Piperson the farmer finds him. The next day, Mr Piperson goes to market, leaving Pigling Bland in his cottage. And Pigling Bland discovers Pigwig, a beautiful little black Berkshire pig, whom Mr Piperson is keeping for ham and bacon. Pigling Bland is horrified, and the 2 pigs manage to escape together. They set off towards the county boundary, and after some adventures on the road, finally cross the bridge to safety. To find out more about this tale, click on the beautiful little black Berkshire pig in this story was a real animal, which Beatrix Potter kept as a pet. She dedicated the book to the children of the farmer who supplied her with Pigwig. For Cecily and Charlie, a tale of the Christmas pig. The Tale of Pigling Bland was published in 1913, the year of Beatrix Potter's marriage to William Heelis. Beatrix always denied that the picture of the two pigs, arm in arm, was a portrait of her and Willie, although it was a view of where they used to walk on Sunday afternoons. The Tale of Samuel Whiskers, or the Roly-Poly Pudding. On baking day, Mrs. Tabitha Twitchit decides to shut up her kittens to keep them out of mischief. She puts Moppet and Mittens into the cupboard, but cannot find Tom anywhere. By the time Cousin Ribby arrives, Moppet and Mittens have escaped too, and Ribby and Tabitha Twitchit set out to search the house. They soon find Moppet and Mittens, who have been scared by an old woman rat and an old man rat stealing a lump of dough, a pat of butter and a rolling pin. Tabitha and Ribby hear a strange roly-poly noise under the floorboards and realise the rats must have taken Tom. They quickly send for John Joyner, the carpenter, to rescue him. Tom, meanwhile, has decided to hide from his mother up the chimney. He becomes lost in the maze of flues, then falls into a little stuffy room where he comes face to face with Mr. Samuel Whiskers, an enormous rat. Samuel calls his wife, Anna Maria, who pounces on Tom and ties him up. Samuel and Anna then fetch dough, butter and the rolling pin and proceed to make Tom into a rather sooty roly-poly pudding. John Joyner rescues Tom, and the rats run away with all their possessions, and other people's, to Farmer Potato's barn. To find out more about this tale, click on the picture. To choose another story, click on Go Back. Beatrix Potter wrote this tale in 1906, just as she was getting to know the farmhouse she had bought the previous year. She was enchanted by Hilltop and all its nooks and crannies, and in it found a perfect setting for the further adventures of Tom Kitten. She dedicated the book to the memory of her own pet rat, Sammy. It was published in 1908. The Tale of the Pie and the Patty Pan. When Ribby the cat asks Duchess the little dog to tea, Duchess is worried that she might have to eat a pie made of mouse. She slips her own veal and ham pie into Ribby's oven while Ribby is out at the baker's. At tea, Duchess devours the pie, thinking it is her own, but begins to feel very ill when she realizes she must have swallowed the patty pan she put in to hold up the pastry. Ribby goes out to fetch Maggotty, the magpie doctor, and meanwhile Duchess finds her own pie, complete with patty pan, still in the top oven. She realizes that the mouse pie must have been cooked in the lower oven, and she has unwittingly eaten it. She puts the remaining pie outside the back door, planning to take it home with her. But when she goes to fetch it, finds that Maggotty and 3 jackdaws have eaten it up. Duchess runs home, and Ribby is surprised to find a broken pie dish and a patty pan in the yard when she comes outside. To find out more about this The Pie and the Patty Pan is set in the Lake District village of Sawrey, which was to become Beatrix Potter's home, although the drawings for this book were done before she bought Hilltop Farm. It was published in 1905. Both Ribby and Duchess were based on real animals living in Sawrey. Beatrix had to send her publisher a photograph of Duchess to prove that the fine ruff she had drawn was not an exaggeration. The Tale of Ginger and Pickles. Ginger, the tomcat, and Pickles, the terrier, run a village shop and allow all their animal customers to buy goods on credit. Sales are enormous, but as none of the customers ever pay their bills, no money comes in. Pickles cannot even afford to buy himself a dog license. So when the policeman doll leaves them a large bill for the rates and taxes, Ginger and Pickles decide to close the shop. This causes great inconvenience. Tabitha Twitchit, who runs the only other shop in the village, puts up her prices and refuses to give credit. Ginger and Pickles have gone off to find more rewarding occupations elsewhere. Eventually, to everyone's delight, Sally Hennypenny reopens the shop with a bargain sale. She insists on being paid cash, but her shop has something for everybody. To find out more about this tale, click on the picture. To choose another story, click on Go. Beatrix Potter used the village of Sawrey as the background for this book, which was published in 1909. It features many familiar characters from her previous stories and is dedicated to John Taylor, whose wife kept the village shop in Sawrey. The Tale of Little Pig Robinson. Little Pig Robinson is the apple of his aunt's eyes. One fine spring morning, they sent him to market in Stymouth with a basket of eggs and cauliflowers to sell, and a list of errands to run. Robinson sells his wares successfully, but while shopping for his aunts, he is lured aboard a ship called the Pound of Candles by a sailor, who turns out to be the ship's cook. Once on board, Robinson is given muffins and crumpets to eat and falls fast asleep. The ship sails, with Robinson on it. Robinson is upset at first, but soon comes to enjoy his life at sea. He is fed endlessly and petted by all the crew. But what he doesn't realise, despite warnings from the ship's cat, is that the cook is planning a birthday treat of roast pork for Captain Barnabas Butcher. The cat decides Robinson must get away, and one calm evening, whilst the crew is playing cards, he helps Robinson to escape in the jolly boat. Robinson rows to a marvellous island, with food aplenty for a hungry pig. When the owl and the pussycat visit him for their honeymoon 18 months later, they find him fatter than ever and very contented. To find out more about this tale, click on the picture. To choose another story, click on Go Back. This story was developed in 1901 and 1902, but not fully worked up until shortly before the book was published in 1930. Beatrix Potter spent many holidays by the seaside and sketched a number of the towns she visited, including Sidmouth and Ilfracombe in Devon, Hastings in Sussex, and Lyme Regis, Dorset, all of which were useful for the book pictures. The story of a fierce bad rabbit. The fierce bad rabbit takes a carrot from the nice gentle rabbit, scratching him badly in the process. The hunter sees the bad rabbit sitting on a bench, and thinking it is a strange bird, shoots. When he comes to look, all he finds on the bench is the carrot and a ball of white fluff. Then the good rabbit sees the bad rabbit running away without his tail and whiskers. To find out more about this tale, click on the picture. To choose another story, click on Go Back. The story of a fierce bad rabbit was first published in 1906 as a panorama unfolding in a long strip of pictures from a wallet. It was written for Louis, the little daughter of publisher Harold Warne, who wanted a story about a really naughty rabbit. The panorama format was not popular with the bookshops, and the story was reprinted in 1916 in book form. The story of Miss Moppet. The cheeky mouse makes fun of Miss Moppet, who bangs her head trying to catch him. Moppet wraps her head up in a duster and sits by the fire. The mouse comes to look, and Miss Moppet watches him secretly through a hole in the duster. Then she pounces and wraps him up in the duster, but she forgets the duster has a hole in it, so the little mouse escapes. To find out more about this tale, click on the picture. The story of Miss Moppet, like the story of a fierce bad rabbit, was first published as a fold-out concertina in 1906. Moppet is Tom Kitten's sister, and this simple story was written for very young children. Apply Dapply's Nursery Rhymes. Apply Dapply, a little brown mouse, goes to the cupboard in somebody's house. In somebody's cupboard there's everything nice, cake, cheese, jam, biscuits, all charming for mice. Apply Dapply has little sharp eyes, and Apply Dapply is so fond of pies. There once was an amiable guinea pig who brushed back his hair like a periwig. He wore a sweet tie as blue as the sky, and his whiskers and buttons were very big. To find out more about this tale, click on the picture. To choose another story, click on Go Back. Ideas for Apply Dapply's nursery rhymes had been in Beatrix Potter's mind for many years before the book was eventually published in 1917. She wrote the rhymes herself over a number of years, and the illustrations too were painted at different times, which explains the variety of styles. Cecily Parsley's Nursery Rhymes. Cecily Parsley lived in a pen and brewed good ale for gentlemen. Gentlemen came every day, till Cecily Parsley ran away. We have a little garden, a garden of our own, and every day we water there the seeds that we have sown. We love our little garden and tend it with such care, you will not find a faded leaf or blighted blossom there. To find out more about this tale, Beatrix Potter's second collection of nursery rhymes has roots stretching just as far back as her first, Apply Dapply. Cecily Parsley's nursery rhymes was eventually published in 1922, dedicated to Little Peter in New Zealand. He was the nephew of one of her New Zealand readers who had been orphaned at the age of 2 during the First World War. As you go through the disc, you will find 16 miniature letters. See if you can collect them all. This is Rupert Potter. This is Beatrix. This is a photograph of from Beatrix Potter's journal. Saturday, June the 8th, 1895. Went to Stroud and stayed 10 days with the Huttons, a most enjoyable visit. I remember that we only had 1 shower of rain and went to 4 tea parties, that I took about 30 photographs and collected many fossils, that the meadows were white and pink with daisies and clover, that the skylarks sang gloriously, and that Caroline was exasperated with the martins, who began to build in 5 places at once and frittered away their time. This is a photograph of Caroline, the Tailor of Gloucester. This is William Heelis. This is a picture. What? This is Ed. This is a portrait of from Beatrix Potter's journal, Wednesday, July the 2nd, 1884. Never saw Grandmamma looking better or livelier, talking about everything, enjoying the jokes, playing whist with her accustomed skill. How pretty she does look with her grey curls under her muslin cap, trimmed with black lace. Her plain crepe dress with broad grey linen collar and cuffs turned over. So erect and always on the move, with her gentle face and wakened, twinkling eyes. There is no one like Grandmamma. She always seems to me as near perfect as is possible. This is a portrait of Jessie Crompton. This is Sir Henry Roscoe, who... This is a portrait. This is Edmund Noel Moore, the Moore family. Publisher Frederick Beatrix with The Warne, The Library, Winifred Warne, Norman Warne. Norman, Beatrix with some ducklings. Beatrix in the porch. William, Beatrix at the Eskdale. Beatrix, Henry, Troutbeck Park. Beatrix in 19... Beatrix at Bolton. Beatrix and her father. Beatrix's A Bedroom at Camfield Place. From Beatrix Potter's Journal. Memories of Camfield Place, written about 1891. The place I love best in the world, and where I have been so happy as a child. I remember lying in a crib in the nursery bedroom under the tyranny of a cross old nurse. I used to be awakened at 4 in the morning by the song of the birds in this elm. I can feel the diamond pattern of that old yellow crib printed against my cheek as I lay with my head where my heels should be, staring backwards over my eyebrows at the plaster heads on the chimney-piece and a large watercolour alpine scene which I regarded with respectful awe. Beatrix and her father, Rupert. Beatrix, A Bedroom at Camfield. From Beatrix Potter's Journal. Memories of Camfield Place, written about 1891. The place I love. Beatrix, a family party at... From Beatrix Potter's Journal, Tuesday, July the 26th, 1892. Benjamin Bunny travelled in a covered basket in the wash place. Took him out of the basket near Dunbar, but proved scared and bit the family. Not such a philosophical traveller as poor Spot. Spot used to be very much in evidence, it would be unkind to say in the way, just before starting, jumping about the carpetless floors with his heavy chain and getting between the men's legs until safely hoisted onto the top of the railway bus in front of the luggage. He smiled benignly between his curls and usually captivated the driver. A family party at Dalguy's house in Beatrix, the schoolroom at Bolton. From Beatrix Potter's Journal, Thursday, September the 20th, 1883. Yesterday we bought a little ring snake, 14 inches long. It was so pretty. It hissed like fun and tied itself into knots in the road when it found it could not escape, but did not attempt to bite as the blindworms do. Friday, September the 21st, a day of misfortunes. Sally, the ring snake, and 4 black newts escaped overnight. Caught 1 black newt in schoolroom and another in larder, but nothing is seen of poor Sally, who is probably sporting outside somewhere. Beatrix aged 15 with her dog Spot. John Millay in his studio. From Beatrix Potter's Journal, Sunday, July the 2nd, 1882. Mr. Millay has been suspected for a dog stealer. There is an ancient, solemn Scotch staghound who walks about this parish in a silver collar. Mr. Millay saw this dog walking along in Onslow Gardens and decided it was just what he wanted for his picture. He followed and watched it for half an hour. Finally, the dog lay down on a doorstep. At last the door was opened and the dog went in. Mr. Millay left his card and wrote to ask if he might paint it, which he has done. Ray, Beatrix and Bert, Beatrix, Rupert and Bert. Beatrix with Beatrix's a portrait photo. Charlie Mackintosh. From Beatrix Potter's Journal, October the 29th, 1892. I have been trying all summer to meet with that learned but extremely shy man. It seemed stupid to take home the drawings without having shown them to him. Accordingly, by appointment, he came, with his soft hat a walking stick, a little bundle, and very dirty boots, at 5 o'clock to the minute. He was quite painfully shy and uncouth at first, as though he was trying to swallow a muffin, and rolling his eyes about and mumbling. I asked him to sit down, his head being somewhere in the chandelier. I would not make fun of him for worlds, but he reminded me so much of a damaged lamp-post. He was certainly pleased with my drawings, and his judgment, speaking to their accuracy in minute botanical points, gave me infinitely more pleasure than that of critics who assume more and know less than poor Charlie. He's a perfect dragon of erudition, and not gardener's Latin either. Noel the Moor, public, Beatrix with the Warne, the library, Norman Winifred Warne, Norman, Beatrix with some duckling, Beatrix, William, Beatrix at the Beatrix's design, French, Henry, Troutbeck Park Farm, Shepherd, Yew Tree, Beatrix in 1940. As you go through the disc, you will find studies of bats, studies of a dead, a painting of a harebells, and in the drawing, greedy guinea, an illustration for the views of a sprays of black fly agaric toadstool, a little cat, studies of a painting, the Tale of Mrs Tittlemouse, studies, views of a ground. As you go through the disc, you can create your own code for secret messages. Click on print for your if you would like to grow some vegetables, click on print. Click on print if you would like to make your own conversation peppermint. Why not collect together all the printouts from this disc?
Well, that's gonna wrap up this little tour of Beatrix Potter. Let's go to the cute little scene with the cat. Right there. Oh, okay, right there. But we did get to learn so much about Beatrix's life, and we got to look at all the cute little stories she wrote. So yes, please give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment down below which story was your favorite, and of course subscribe for more nostalgic gaming. Remember, you are special and loved, you are never alone, you're always welcome to come back and hang out anytime. Until the next video, God bless, I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye, everyone.